Hi, this is Andrea Kane, and I'm here with you to study the Language of Medicine 12th edition with Davie Ellen Chandler for HSC 114, and we're on week 1, but chapter 2, terms pertaining to the body as a whole. Our chapter goals are to define terms that apply to the structural organization of the body, identify the body cavities and recognize the organs contained within those cavities, locate and identify the anatomical and clinical divisions of the abdomen, and locate and name the anatomical divisions of the back. We also want to become acquainted with terms that describe positions, directions, and planes of the body, and identify the meanings for new word elements and use them to understand medical terms. You may find it helpful to follow along in your textbook as I go through some of these things, so please go ahead and pull it out and take a look at chapter 2. We want to define terms that apply to the structural organization of the body, identify those body cavities, and recognize the organs that are contained in those cavities, as well as locate and identify the anatomic and clinical divisions of the abdomen. But one of the ways that we can start off is by looking at the structural organization of the body. On the very most basic level, there are cells. Cells then work together to form tissues. Tissues work together to become organs, and organs work together in body systems. So, for instance, before I go there, a little bit further on, you'll see some visuals that'll explain this, but this is really the 4 basic building blocks that you want to be aware of. So moving on to cells, they are the fundamental unit of all living things. The major parts of a cell include chromosomes, nucleus, cell membrane, cytoplasm, mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum. Those are probably terms that you're familiar with from biology, or maybe an anatomy physiology class that you're currently taking or will be taking. I'm not going to go into detail, although your book does cover these in a brief way. We just more want to be aware of the words and their spelling, and as well as their pronunciation. So the fundamental unit of a cell is a cell, and this shows you a visual of what those different structures look like. So you see the cell membrane, the nucleus, the chromosomes, the cytoplasm, the endoplasmic reticulum and mitochondria, as well as the ribosomes. Some additional terms that you'll want to be aware of include anabolism, catabolism, cell membrane, chromosomes, cytoplasm, DNA, endoplasmic reticulum, genes, karyotype, metabolism, mitochondria, and nucleus. Cells are then specialized to carry out individual functions. There are different types of cells, including muscle cells, nerve cells, epithelial cells that are like in skin and hair, and fat cells. So let's take a look at those. This visual shows you a muscle cell. You can see the striations in the muscle tissue, those thin lines running through. You can see a nerve cell where it almost has fingers reaching out to pass messages on to the next nerve cell. Then you'll see an epithelial cell there, thinking skin and hair. And the last one is a fat cell where you can see that lipid within it. A tissue is a group of similar cells that work together to do a specific job. Organs are different types of tissues that combine to form an organ, and body systems are groups of organs that work together to perform complex functions. And this is the visual I was referring to earlier that shows you the building. So you've got cells, individual cells, then you have tissues and organs and systems. Some additional terms to be aware of include adipose tissue, cartilage, epithelial cells, histologist, larynx, pharynx, pituitary gland, thyroid gland, trachea, ureter, urethra, uterus, and viscera. When it comes to body cavities, these are the spaces within the body that contain internal organs or viscera. So make sure that you know viscera means internal organs. And that includes these 4. So there's 4 cavities that you need to be aware of: cranial, thoracic, abdominal, pelvic, and spinal. All right, let's take a look. If you start here at the top, we're going to start here at the top. Your cranial body cavity has your brain and your pituitary gland in it. So cranial body cavity has your brain and pituitary gland. Next one is your spinal cavity, and that contains all of your spinal cord and all the nerves that come off that spinal cord. Now, another term you need to be familiar with is dorsal. Dorsal means the back side. And you'll see as we go further into this chapter that there are at least 3 names for the back of someone, including dorsal, posterior, and then we'll move forward with the others. Now, looking at the front side of the body, you get to the thoracic cavity. This is above the diaphragm. Notice the diaphragm in there. Thoracic cavity is above it, and that has things like the lungs in it and that sort of thing. Below the diaphragm is the abdominal cavity, and typically people refer to the abdominal pelvic cavity as one cavity, but you could technically consider the pelvic sort of a second cavity if you wanted to, but it's really together for the most part because it's below the diaphragm. So as we were talking about, what's in each cavity? Well, in the cranial, it's the brain, which includes the pituitary gland. The thoracic is your lungs, heart, esophagus, trachea, bronchial tubes, thymus gland, and aorta. Your abdominal and pelvic, if you put those together, includes stomach, small and large intestines, spleen, pancreas, liver, gallbladder, bladder, rectum, urethra, and ureters, and in the female, it also includes a uterus and vagina. Your spinal cavity just includes the spinal cord and all the nerves that are coming off of it. So quick quiz, which body cavity contains the pleural cavity and the mediastinum? When you see the word plural, think lungs, and that will help you answer this question. Which body cavity contains the peritoneum? Peritoneum covers abdominal. Hint, hint, hint. So anytime you see peritoneum, think abdominal. Those two go together. All right, organs of the abdominal, pelvic, and thoracic cavities include trachea, lungs, diaphragm, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, colon, which is part of your large intestine, or another word for it, appendix, bladder, thyroid gland, aorta, which is part of coming off the heart, the major artery that comes off the heart, spleen, stomach, colon, small intestine, and sigmoid colon. So here we go. This shows you the organs as they are in the abdominal, pelvic, and thoracic cavities. And remember, what divides them? It's the diaphragm. It's this little line right here. That's diaphragm. And it comes over and it runs down here beside the liver. So the lungs and the heart are always going to be above the diaphragm. They'll be in the thoracic cavity. Below it will be the liver, the stomach, spleen, your small intestines, your large intestine, your pancreas, and everything else as they go down. All right, some additional terms you'll need to know: abdominal cavity, cranial cavity, diaphragm. That might be a challenge to spell, so make sure that you practice diaphragm. Dorsal. Dorsal, remember we learned, is back, and that means posterior. It's the back side of the body. Mediastinum, pelvic cavity, peritoneum, pleura, pleural cavity, spinal cavity, thoracic cavity, and ventral or anterior. Anterior is another word for front, and ventral is too. So if you're looking at someone's front side, that's their anterior or ventral side. If you're looking at someone's back, you're looking at them at their dorsal side or posterior side. Now we're going to move into the abdominal pelvic regions, and there are 9 of these, and they are laid out left and right. So think of it as you're sitting here listening to this video. You have your left hand, your right hand, and as someone is standing and looking at you, Your left is still your left, your right is still your right, and that will help you as you label these. So let's take a look at this visual. On the left hand side, because remember this is left hand, right hand, you have your left hypochondriac region. Chondriac means cartilage, so it's right underneath the cartilage. Be thinking about the rib cage cartilage. Hypo is below, so below that region. So it's the first one right below. So you have a left and a right. Those are on either side. In the middle, you have epigastric. Well, we've learned epigastric is above the stomach. Below the epigastric is your umbilical region, where your belly button is. And so that's like the center of this tic-tac-toe square, so to speak. So the very center is umbilical. Above is epigastric. Below, what do you think it is? Hypogastric, below the stomach. So you know epigastric, umbilical, and hypogastric. Then you have your left and right hypochondriac. They're right below this cartilage of the rib cage. Underneath that, you have your lumbar, left and right lumbar region. Think about your back. This is your lumbar area. It's in the middle of your middle to lower back. When you get down to here, your left and right inguinal areas. Inguinal sort of means groin. So if you think about it, it's closest to your groin, these two sections here. Hopefully that will help you as you memorize these regions. So the right upper quad, and then we're going to move on to quadrants. Sorry about that. This was regions, and there's 9 of those. Now we're going to shift to quadrants, and there's only 4 quadrants. There's right upper quadrant, left upper quadrant, right lower quadrant, and left lower quadrant. This slide goes through what's in each quadrant. But this shows you a visual. So again, your belly button is sort of the very middle, and you have right upper quadrant, left upper quadrant, right lower quadrant, left lower quadrant. And so you can see here, looking at this picture, what this is. And you hear about quadrants mostly being used, especially when you're talking about abdominal pain, or if you're talking about radiology tests that they're going to do in this area. You'll hear the quadrants being referred to. I guess I need to stop and take a sip. Sorry, just a second. I'm losing my voice, talking too much, I guess. I guess that's an encouragement for me to hurry up, perhaps. All right, positions, directions, planes, and terminology. Let's locate and name the anatomic divisions of the back. We're going to become acquainted with terms that describe positions, directions, and planes of the body, and identifying the meaning for new word elements and use them to understand medical terms. So let's get to it. There are 5 anatomical divisions of the back. And when we're talking about this, we're talking the spine, the vertebrae. There's cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal. All right, where are they located? They are right here. Cervical are the first 7 vertebrae in your spine, in your neck region. So anytime you see cervical, be thinking neck, and there's 7 of those. The next 12 are thoracic. Again, thoracic means chest. So be thinking about that. There's 12 of those, thoracic, chest. The next set is lumbar. There's 5 of those, L1 through L5. And they are sort of lower back, if you think about it. Then you get your sacral bone. Your sacral bone is made up of 4 bones that are fused together, and so is your coccyx. It, again, has those bones fused together. Actually, your sacral has 5. Sorry about that. Your sacrum has 5 bones fused together. Your coccyx has 4. And so, but they're fused together into each one bone. So sometimes you'll just hear S1 as sacral, but there could be S1 through S5 if they get very technical about it. So we studied the abdominal pelvic regions. You had your hypochondriacs left and right, and in the middle was your epigastric. Then you had your left and right lumbars with your umbilical in the center, then your left and right inguinals with your hypogastric in the center. Your abdominal pelvic quadrants, right upper, right lower, left lower. And then the divisions of the back. cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, coccygeal, cervical 7, thoracic 12, lumbar 5, sacral usually S1, but it can be S1 through S5. Coccygeal is usually just your coccyx bone, but technically it has 4 bones in it. Related terms that you may hear and need to either be able to pronounce or spell are vertebra, that means a single vertebra, a single bone. Vertebrae, that's the plural for multiple vertebra, is vertebrae. Spinal column, spinal cord, and disc. And notice how disc is spelled, there is no K there. So, quick quiz. Name the abdominal pelvic region that is located in the central region near the navel. And when you see navel, think belly button, and that should help you. All right, name the abdominal pelvic region that is located in the lower middle below the umbilical region. Below. So be thinking of that prefix that means less or below or those types of things. All right, so now we're going to move to positional and directional terms of the body. And I'm going to list these out for you and then we'll go through them. Anterior versus posterior, because that's front to back. Deep versus superficial. Proximal versus distal. Inferior versus superior. Medial versus lateral. And then supine versus prone. These are all opposites. So be thinking about that. Anterior is opposite to posterior. Deep is opposite to superficial. Proximal is opposite to distal. Inferior is opposite to superior. Medial is the middle of your body. Lateral is either side. Supine is when you're laying on your back, and prone is when you're laying on your tummy. So those are opposites. So supine, you're on your back. Prone, you're on your tummy. And this gives you those to fill in. So item number 1 would be anterior. That is the front of the body. Number 2 is posterior. That's the back side of the body. Number 3, notice how long this line is. It's going way into the person. That's deep. Versus 4, it's just barely touching. It's superficial. Proximal is close to the body. Distal is exactly what it sounds like. It's further away. So in number 5, it's closer to the middle of the body versus number 6, which is distal or further away, distant. Inferior means down here at the bottom. It's further away again. It's below. So when you're thinking inferior, think below. Superior is up here above. So think inferior is close to the feet. Superior is going to be close to the head. So, for instance, your knee is superior to your foot, and your head is superior to your neck, and your tummy is inferior to your neck, and your knee is inferior to your tummy, your stomach. So make sure that you understand those two. Medial is smack dab in the middle. It is the middle of your body, right down the middle. Lateral is its left side or right side. It's one side or the other. Supine, again here you're laying on your back, face up. And prone is you're laying on your stomach and your face down. So those will help you with those terms. I told you that there were multiple definitions or terms used for forward versus or front versus back. And that sort of thing. And this is where we're going to start to see those when we talk about the planes of the body. There are 3 basic planes. There is frontal, which is known as coronal, sagittal, known as lateral, and transverse, which is cross-sectional or axial. So make sure that you know all of these terms. Make sure you know that coronal is frontal, and lateral is sagittal, and cross-sectional or axial is transverse. So what do these all mean? All right, let's take the first one. The first one is the green one. So look at how the green is dividing this poor guy here. The green divides the front of him from the back of him. Front from back. So frontal or coronal. It's dividing the person front to back. Sagittal is blue. And look how it's going right through the middle of this guy. It's a medial type of division. So you've got left side versus right side. It's laterality. So sagittal, and there should actually be a second T in there. That's a spelling error on the part of the publisher. Shame on them. But sagittal means lateral, so it's left side versus right side. Axial or transverse or cross-sectional is this pink, where it divides the top of the body from the bottom of the body, or upper part of the body from the lower part of the body. That's transverse or axial. So some additional terms you'll need to know: anterior or ventral, deep, distal, frontal or coronal plane, inferior, lateral, medial, posterior or dorsal, prone, proximal, sagittal or lateral plane, superficial, superior or cephalic. And remember we said cephalic is like head, so be thinking head. Supine, transverse or axial plane. All right, now let's get to some combining forms. Abdomino, adipo, antero. Cervico, chondro, chromo, coccygo. And I want to point something out here. Anytime you have this YX combination for coccyx, pharynx, larynx, when you go to your combining form, that X changes into a G. So watch out for that. That YG is YX when you're going to change from the combining form to the meaning. Cranio, cyto, disto, dorso. Histo and histio. Notice that. One stuck an I in there. Ilio, inguino, cario. Latero, lumbo, medio, nucleo. Pelvi. Ooh, remember how I told you most combining vowels are O's? We see that, but this is an I. So make sure when you're doing your memorization and you're studying that when you think pelvis and it's pelvi with an I. There's no O there. Pharyngo, remember how I talked to you about the Y and X, pharynx, larynx, those types of things, how it changes to a G. So notice how it did that there. Postero, proximo, sacro, sarco, spino, thelo, and thelio. Watch how they stuck that I in there. Thoraco, tracheo, umbilico, ventro, vertebro, sorry, get that out here, vertebro, viscero. Now some prefixes: ana, cata, epi, hypo, inter, and intra. Watch out, inter and intra, they mean two different things. Meta. And then some suffixes: eel, eac, eor, ism, os, plasm, somes, and type. And I want to point out here, look, we've got 4 of them that mean pertaining to. As I warned you, there's all sorts of ones that mean pertaining to. All right, quick quiz. Which term means process of cutting the skull? Cutting the skull. So you're going to want to look for one of these endings that means cutting. And then you're going to want to look at the root and which one means skull. Hopefully you can get this one. All right, that is it for chapter 2. I wish you a wonderful week, and I'll be back to talk to you about chapters 3 and 4 for week 2. Take care.